years, Susan Hill Smith served as an Isle of Palm City Council member. Now she wants to return to City Council to tackle a host of issues, including beach renourishment. I talked one-on-one with Susan for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Susan Hill Smith, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Hey, Quintin, it's great to see you again.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, obviously, you are a former Isle of Palm City Council member. You served on City Council for 4 years. Now that there's an open seat on council, you want to return to tackle a lot of issues on the island. So, Susan, tell me this. Why Isle of Palm City Council? Why you again?
Well, I appreciate that, and it's so great to be here. And I want to take a second just to thank you for the excellent work that you do in, doing these interviews with the important people in the community. So thank you so much for that and for this platform. And as you mentioned, I have served previously on Isle of Palm City Council from 2018 to 2021. It was a really busy time, and including that we hired a city administrator who now is getting ready to, unfortunately, is well for her. It's a wonderful move to the Municipal Association of South Carolina, but Desiree Fregoso has done such a wonderful job for us, and so it's full circle that I will hopefully be coming back and help hire her replacement, because I was part of the council that hired her to begin with, as well as we also wound up hiring a police chief during that period. So we were very busy, and one of the great things that I was able to get going during that time was to create an environmental advisory committee, which has just attracted an amazing set of residents who are advancing different projects that I'm excited to be a part of, and hoping that I'll be able to help advance those, as well as really resiliency is such a key thing right now, and is one of the main reasons that I want to get back on council, because I see the need for our community to get really proactive about beach preservation. Is an obvious one right now, because we have hot spots at both ends of our island that and almost feel like emergency situations. And then, but looking forward, we know that we're going to have to be prepared to do major beach renourishment projects on probably a faster basis than we really thought before, because of sea level rise. And so, drainage projects are also a huge thing, but both of those things are impacted by sea level rise. And we just recently have had a sea level rise adaptation plan has been put into play with Seaman and Whiteside. And they recently delivered, I'd say in the spring, they gave a presentation to our Environmental Advisory Committee and our Planning Commission in May. And I would highly encourage anybody on the Isle of Palms who hasn't had a chance to learn more about what the potential impacts and solutions for sea level rise challenges that we're facing. If they haven't had a chance to learn about that, I would encourage them to go to the city's website, find those meetings from May of those two groups, and it's a similar presentation that you'll see. But Seaman and Whitesides tells us that we can expect a foot of sea level rise by 2050 for Isle of Palms. And so that means that in addition to the challenges that we're already facing now with resiliency, we can expect even more. So we really need to get ready and to be prepared and advance some of these projects, accelerate them really, so that we're fully prepared. It's not going to happen overnight either. We're already having some issues and that we need to resolve, but we can expect that we'll have even more in the future if we don't do what we need to do now. And I'd be happy to share more about some of those things.
Yes, and a lot of people don't know. Of course, you were my old boss many, many years ago at the Post and Quarry when I was an ink reporter back in 2000.
Right,
And
right.
now, just last week, well, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I just turned 40. So I just, it's a full circle here, just talking to my old boss here.
Well,
But let me ask you, with those particular projects that need to be advanced, where
mhm.
exactly are those projects, and how long should it take for those projects to be completed now that we have these issues with sea level rise?
Right. So, in at the beginning of 2023, they had a comprehensive list of drainage projects was shared for with the city, and that's um, includes five major projects that
Mm,
need to get done. In addition to the ones that we just recently completed, we
yeah,
completed a phase 3 drainage project
sure.
that was something that when I first got on council, we initiated. It
Okay.
just was completed. It's an amazing project. It prevents water that is tidal water from coming back into the island. It makes sure that water can flow out at the same time. So that affects a certain area around Waterway Boulevard.
Oh, yeah.
And it was 3 major outfalls. That was a great project that was just completed. In addition, they're getting ready to start 2 other projects right now. One is Waterway Boulevard, and they're elevating a multi-use path as well as doing modifications to the related golf course area
Sure.
to help make sure that it's going to prevent water in a really high tide situation
Sure.
from inundating the interior of the island in that area.
Mm,
So it's an exciting project, as well as what they're calling phase 4 drainage
oh, yeah.
project, which is over on kind of around Palm Boulevard from 38th to 41st.
Mm,
But in addition to those projects, there are 5 other major projects that really have been recommended as high needs, but really haven't gotten kicked off yet.
mm,
And those involve Merritt Boulevard, Carolina Boulevard, Ocean Boulevard,
sure.
and is another section of Palm Boulevard that is more around the 29th and 30th
Mm,
intersection. Um,
wow.
so these are important projects, not just for the people that live around those
Yeah.
areas, but also the people that drive through those areas. So the sea level rise presentation that I mentioned before, they shared that, by their rough estimates, about 12,050 different properties or
Wow.
buildings will be at risk
Yeah.
if we don't prepare, and about 12 and a half miles of roadway will be
Huh.
at risk.
Right.
A lot of those places are places that people need to drive through to get
Sure.
to their homes as well. So,
Sure.
and they put it in perspective as if you can remember the nor'easter that we
Right.
had in December that caught everybody off guard.
Mm,
And it was probably I think it was the 4th highest tide that we've seen in this area. And they said, in future, we can potentially expect that with every king tide.
mm,
So we could potentially be having that kind of event 12 times a year once we get to 2050.
yeah.
So those are some of the reasons that we really need to go after things. And one thing that I'm encouraging and advocating for to help accelerate these projects, because we can't just do one after the other, or it'll be 2050 by the time we finish this list of projects. Um, if we can add, as Sullivan's Island has, a staff position for natural resources
Sure.
and resiliency, that would both help us accelerate some of these really important projects,
Mm,
give somebody with a STEM focus an opportunity to scrutinize not only the projects themselves, but also the work that's being done by contractors. We, for example, have a coastal engineering, um, you know, outfit that is essentially does our beach renourishment
huh.
projects and advises us on other coastal issues.
Mm,
But really, they're working for a lot of different people, a lot of different beach communities. We need to make sure that we have somebody that is kind of paying attention and making sure that things are getting done, and that you know our needs as a community are being met, and that we're imagining some of the situations that we might be encountering so they don't catch us off guard. So, for example, I think we were a little bit surprised by this erosion
Right.
situation that's happened on the beach at the southwest end.
Yeah.
And, initially they even had to resort to using a really kind of cheap sandbag that was made of plastic that deteriorated very quickly. And I think that was part of the reason was they didn't have the kind of sandbags that they really should be using available. There was a shortage.
Right.
And that, we're not the only community that's going through these things. So
Yeah,
realizing
well,
that we might need
you're on
to
TV,
actually stockpile some of these supplies
Yes,
is
yes, yes.
important.
Oh, yeah.
And so those are kinds of things that I think we need to be forward thinking on, and having a position of somebody who at the table who has a science background and focus, I think would be really helpful.
And Susan, so let me ask you this. With those particular, well, first and foremost, does the city of Alpha Palms have enough money to take care of all of these projects that you just mentioned until 2050?
Well, that is a really good question, because these are big ticket items, and that list of projects that I told you that was recommended, the comprehensive drainage projects, the price tag that they put on that in that report, I think it's $47 million, which is, I think, you talked to Rusty Streetman, one of the people that I'm in the race with, and I think it's mentioned maybe 30 to $40 million. It's actually at least 47 is what was projected in that report, and that was in 2023. I mean, you can imagine that
Right. The
it's,
prices.
it's only that price tag is only going to go up. So there's that, and then there's also these beach renourishment projects. While they often are joint collaborative projects, that is not just the city,
Right.
but also Wild Dunes Community
Yes.
and Resort are paying part of that. And if things go right, the state and potentially the federal government may be paying into it as well. But those projects, our coastal science expert has projected that those could cost well over $100 million over the next 30 years.
Yeah.
So maybe up to $150 million. At one beach renourishment project that we did in 2018 cost about $14 million. So some of that was FEMA funding, because we'd had some storms come through, and so it timed out for us that we were able to cover some of that with FEMA money, and Wild Dunes chipped in, really paid for a lot of their share. And one thing that since then that I think Wild Dunes has been smart in doing is they enacted a real estate transaction fee.
I see.
That then that money goes into a special fund that they are saving for future renourishment projects. So,
Wow.
so they've really, I think they're maybe up to around $9 million in that fund,
Wow.
which is, we're going to need that money, or collectively, to help cover their next beach renourishment, which will probably be needed within at least a year or two.
Wow. That's soon. So let me ask you this, Susan. You probably don't know this, but on the Wild Dunes side, I know they're saving up that $9 million for some of those beach renourishment projects there. Do you know how many of those projects are there?
How many projects in Wild Dunes?
Yes, ma'am.
They have, I think, one kind of main
Okay.
area that is where you're going to need to probably regularly do renourishment projects around Beechwood East.
Oh, okay.
And so, that's not to say that they won't have other hotspots as well. But that's their, at least has been their main area. One thing that I'm glad to see the council has already started doing is a more regular monitoring of the entire beach. And I believe that they just recently moved that to 2 times a year. And actually they could probably do it quarterly to make sure that we know what's going on and see the changes, not just even on the ends, but make sure that we're not missing anything in the whole 7 mile stretch of the beach. I mean, generally the middle of the beach has fared very well lately, and no issues well, there are maybe some spots, but generally no major issues in those areas. But that doesn't mean that as things change, it's a barrier island and things are pretty dynamic. So, yeah.
So where exactly is the island keeping their eye on when it comes to those hot spots?
Well, in terms of the beach, it's right now
Oh,
it's the
oh,
southwest and northeast
mhm.
ends where we have the most dynamic activities. So,
Cavity. And going back to those beach renourishment projects, Susan, would it be ideal for the city to establish a public-private partnership for some of these beach renourishment projects, since you all can't get the money as you want from the federal and state governments?
right. Well, I mean, historically, we have gotten money. We probably need to make sure that we're set up for the future.
Mm,
And I do think that, unfortunately, there used to be more money available for beach projects at the state level. And
mm,
that's one thing that I know is, I think, a priority for our lobbyists
okay.
to be working on with the state legislators and making sure that they understand just how important the beaches are, not just to our community, but really to the entire state, both from a quality of life perspective for everybody who comes here and enjoys them, but also the tourism dollars that they generate in terms of tax accommodations funds and other and hospitality taxes for people who are coming to visit and stopping along the way as well as they come to the beach. Lots of people are benefiting in South Carolina from our beautiful beaches.
I know you all make a ton of money from obviously accommodation taxes and whatnot. And
Mhm.
obviously, you have your business district on the Isle of Palms. Is it possible to even create a TIF there?
Oh, well, I know that there is a special committee that has been looking at different possibilities for additional beach, regular
Sure.
streams of more beach renourishment funding.
Sure.
And one thing I think you maybe mentioned or thinking about is that the Dare County, North Carolina, has a tiered tax increment district, I
Huh.
believe, where, depending on where you are in relationship to the beach, you may be paying in, I don't believe I'm not sure if they call it a tax district or if they call it a fee, but you're paying more if you're closer to the beach.
Uh,
So everybody is chipping in to
sure.
take care of the beach, but the people that perhaps are, see a closer link to their property values
Mm,
are maybe paying in more. And that's that. And I think is something that, seems like it could be a reasonable way if we really need to raise extra funds. But also this idea that Wild Dunes has used a real estate transaction fee, that is something that really could be helpful if we were able to do that on the island potentially, not just in Wild Dunes, but have that be an island-wide transaction fee.
mm,
Um, I think it needs to be investigated more thoroughly, and I do believe that the state legislature might have to grant us permission as a
yeah.
municipality to do that, while Dunes is able to do it as a private entity.
Yeah. Yeah, that
So
makes sense. Okay. With all of this that's going on right now, you have the beach renourishment projects, you have erosion, this and that season, as you know.
we got a lot, and
Uh,
there's more.
and more.
We should be undergrounding power lines, and
Oh,
that's another resiliency issue that has
mm,
gotten a lot of attention
right.
in the past week or so as
Mm,
Dominion Energy
yeah.
has come to our community with a plan because they need to remove palmetto trees that are getting in the way of power lines. So um, that has brought a lot of voices in our community asking, why can't we underground power lines
Mm,
faster? And to be honest, that's something that we need to go back and press Dominion on, because when I was on the public Works Committee, when I was on council my last year, our group picked out 5 different underground projects that were in special areas where we thought that they would do a lot of good. And we've only seen Dominion follow through on one of those projects since then, and that was 3 years ago. So evidently, Dominion may not have the bandwidth that they need to follow through on underground projects at the rate that we would like to see them do that. And so that's one thing I think we need to be pressing, and maybe we have to go to the state level to make our case that Dominion needs to be doing more to help us get projects done in terms of undergrounding power lines.
Until that issue is actually resolved, Susan, what is the city's temporary plan to make certain that some of these benefits, as a result of having these power lines underground, help?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, as far well, let me ask you this: how many of those projects, as far as underground projects, does the city have in mind right now?
Well, as I mentioned in 2021,
Oh yes,
our committee picked out 5 projects with Dominion in collaboration with
right.
Dominion. They gave us kind of a menu of different ones that they would suggest where they thought, here's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck in terms of improvement of service. And so we agreed on that, and Dominion takes a percentage of the revenue that they generate from our community, and then they ask us to match it in terms of paying for these projects. Right. However,
yes,
that money does roll off after 5 years. Dominion's part of that money, 5 years later, what they collected, say in 2020, is going to roll off after 2025. That's another thing that I think we need to address. I think that if Dominion can't help us get these things done in a certain amount of time, and then we risk losing that money in terms of being able to use it for projects, that's something else that needs to change. We don't need to have a deadline. If they can't help us meet the deadline, then there shouldn't be a deadline for using the funds.
And so, how much of those funds is the city actually pitching in for these projects?
I was wanting to go back and look at how much some of these projects were, and it's fairly expensive to even do just a small area, a small project. I wasn't able to dig that back up, but I think it's probably at least $50,000 to do a small project. And really to do the whole island might be on the scale of our drainage situation. So, but I think you prioritize the areas like we had started to do, where you see vulnerabilities, where you have maybe connections that are going to affect a lot of people if they wind up going out. So similar with sewer, as we try to convert help more people convert from septic to sewer, I think you look at set priorities. And for example, with the drainage situation, from that sea level rise study, we can see that there are definite areas, more not as you might expect close to the ocean, but close to the intercoastal waterway and the creeks on the other side of the island, are really more at risk for extreme flooding problems and down the road than the other areas. So if you can kind of focus on those areas and find the overlap between the areas that have a high concentration of septic tanks and a high concentration of drainage issues, then those are probably the areas where we not only need to help provide the infrastructure, but also figure out a way to help homeowners cover the potential costs of hooking into the system.
And I know that's a big issue when you go out to the Phillips community in Mount Pleasant over there off of Long Point Road. But on the Isle of Palms, how many people are still wanting to get from septic to sewer on the Isle of Palms?
Well, that's a good question. There are there's more than, I think, 1,000. It might be somewhere between 1,000 to 1,500 homes that still are on septic, and my home is actually one of them. And it gets really complicated. It's not like you can depending on your proximity to lines that are available, it can be a wide range of expense to hook in. So we still have about, I guess that would put us at about a third of our homeowners or homes are related to septic. So if that answers your question.
Sure.
And it's in pockets, obviously.
Yeah.
There's all of the Wild Dunes area is all on sewer. So it's really more in the heart of the island and towards the southwest end where you find more people on septic still. And some people who don't have any issues right now aren't necessarily ready to make that transition. But it really is something that we as a community need to be trying to go toward, especially with sea level rise potentially complicating things and making it more difficult for people to have viable septic systems.
And what are those other complicated issues that are actually on the rise as you see it as a resident of the Isle of Palms?
Well, we do have other important issues that we're dealing with. I mean, I think of the resiliency are some of the things we need to deal with more immediately. But at the same time, we have traffic issues. Obviously, when we wind up dealing with gridlock traffic on busy beach days, we are hopeful that we can get our friends in Mount Pleasant to join us in advocating for a switch to the configuration on the Isle of Palms connector so that we get 2 lanes exiting, not just off the bridge, but then into Mount Pleasant. So, because it's not just residents who are impacted by that. A lot of the people sitting in traffic are beachgoers who wind up not being able to enjoy their trip as much because they wind up sitting in their cars for a really long time trying to get off the island. And it's really not, it's a safety issue too, honestly. The way that the gridlock has grown into not just the connector, but into our interior streets so that people don't have anywhere to go and they're blocking access. For example, if we have emergencies, it makes it more complicated. Not that our emergency crews can't get places, but it makes it much more difficult for them to, get to people who need help. And that happens a lot on a busy beach weekend as well. So.
Wow. Yeah, I've seen that. I haven't been over there on the weekends, but during the day, and I know how it is on the connector as far as traffic. But and I'm looking at it right now. Well, from where the Harris Teeter is right there in that shopping center. I'm supposed to know the name of it by now these days.
We just call it the Harris Teeter shopping
Right.
center.
Yeah. All the way to the Isle of Palms connector. How much has that gridlock grown during the busy peak times of the season?
Well, that's one thing that I would really like us to measure better, honestly. That's something, and I haven't mentioned this, but I'm working for the past 8 months now. I've been on a community enrichment task force that has been really looking at a lot of these different problems and challenges and opportunities that we have for our island to thrive. And we're putting together our last draft of recommendations to present to City Council on behalf of the citizens and the community right now. So that is one issue. It's not an issue that we broke into subgroups, and I was on the environmental subgroup, but we had another group that was looking at those issues. One thing that I'm really hopeful is that the city will start to kind of figure out a way to get some data around how much gridlock we've got, how far the backup gets, that kind of thing. If we can get 2 lanes off the connector, we might be good. But at the same time, it would be good to measure where we've been to see what the improvement is. And part of it's also timing the lights, connect lights correctly and all of that too. That can be a piece of helping as well. So, but it would be good to have a control to say, this is how bad it got this one season before we made the change, and then to see the difference. But I'll tell you, I mean, it gets backed up. I don't know if this means too much to you, but it gets backed up for probably sometimes, I'd say 5 to 10 blocks down Palm Boulevard, reaching towards the resort,
Sure.
maybe more. I mean, I've had a friend on one really difficult day that wound up spending an hour just to get from Wild Dunes to the Harris Teeter. And he, a lot of people say, well, we just decide to stay around the island and we don't go anywhere. But I think he was, going to a wedding or a special event. He needed to get off the island.
Yeah.
But I think it's an access issue too, because if you want to come to the beach from anywhere else in the Low Country,
Cool.
but you maybe avoid it because you know that you might get stuck in traffic, if you're not taking advantage of the opportunity to enjoy the beach because of the traffic situation, that's also a negative, I think, for everybody.
Wow. Susan, what's holding Mount Pleasant up? What do they have to bring to the table that the city of Alva Palms will actually agree to get what you want, which is those 2 lanes?
I'm not really sure exactly. I don't know that. I'm not sure if they're really thinking about it from the perspective of their residents. I haven't had a chance to talk to the
Sure.
mayor about it directly, but I would be glad to help in that conversation if needed. I have friends in Mount Pleasant who told me that they don't go to the beach much anymore because of traffic. And that would be one thing that I would say to the mayor of Mount Pleasant,
Right.
to help make that case that he has people in his community who are not fully enjoying the beach because they don't want to deal with the hassle of the traffic that happens on a busy Saturday and Sunday in the afternoon.
And it's probably busy out there now with the beautiful weather out here.
Well, it is beautiful. Honestly, it's gorgeous, and not as many people come out in October for the obvious reasons. I mean,
Right.
spring and summer are really our crunch times, but
Wow.
that's when everybody wants to go. But October is really lovely.
Yes, yeah, in November here. Speaking of obviously traffic and parking, Susan, are there any plans, or should there be any plans to ask the Department of Transportation to actually amend that 2015 parking plan?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, although I just assume that that should stand. I mean, that's really was a something that the Department of Transportation agreed with us was a great way of getting traffic streamlined, having the public parking be close to the beach, and preventing the possibility of traffic weaving in and out of the cross streets that really would not be a safe situation both for the community as well as the visitors, and with people getting out of cars and things like that. The 2015 managed parking plan really makes a lot of sense for everybody, not just residents, but also visitors. And I hope that we don't have to return to a conversation about that. It's something that works and should continue to stay in place.
And what else should stay in place when it comes to that parking plan, Susan?
Oh, what was that again?
Yes, ma'am. And what else should stay in place when it comes to obviously what happened with the parking plan back in 2015?
Well, I mean, we also offer a great deal of paid parking
Sure.
in the over at Front Beach,
Sure.
which I mean, between the Charleston County Park parking area and the city offers 2 lots. There's let's see, and the free parking that we offer currently along Palm Boulevard and some other locations. We're offering collectively, I think, close to 1,500 parking spaces. Now, is there room for improvement in how we direct traffic potentially? How this whole traffic setup is done? Yes, we might need to, or we may be able to look at that again and revisit and see, are there things that could be done better for everybody's sake? But right now, it seems to work fairly well. It's those frustrations that happen on those busy days, though, that I think that we really need to iron out. So I'm not really sure. I mean, one thing that we've talked about in the Community Enrichment Task Force is trying to find ways to really alert people when we're out of room, so that they don't arrive and then find frustration in trying to find a parking space, and to educate people on when those busy times are and encourage them to think about coming in the off times or coming early so that they can more easily get a space, or to carpool and to use the beach shuttle we have that is connecting people in Mount Pleasant. There's a pickup where a free shuttle will take you from parking, free and easy parking in Mount Pleasant, to the beach, and I'm hoping that continues to take off.
And do you know how many people actually took the beach shuttle this past year?
I'm not sure of the actual number, but I'm not sure if I've heard a report on this past beach season. I think I maybe heard kind of a mid-season report. What I have heard is that it seems to have gotten off a little bit sluggish, but has continued to grow in the number of people who are using it. So I think that's really encouraging. And to be honest, when we first discussed it, we talked about charging people for it, and I was a very strong voice to say, no, we need to make this free. Everybody needs to chip in and cover the costs of it, and make it free. Because if we don't make it free, I thought, and I can imagine that we really would have seen low ridership.
Now that it's picking up a little bit, as everyone is expecting here on the Alva Palms with the beach shuttle, is it actually possible to add additional spots? I know it's tight on the island right now.
Oh, additional parking spots?
Oh, bus stops. I'm sorry.
Oh, bus stops. Oh, that's a good point. Yes. In fact, I've had people mention that before as a way of encouraging and not just having it stop at Front Beach, but also to other, have other drop-offs, so that if somebody wanted to go to a less traveled, less trafficky in terms of the number of people on the beach, if they wanted to go to something that was a little quieter.
Yes.
And so that is something that we could explore, I believe, and maybe help facilitate some movement around the island and make it easy for people without them having to bring their own car. So I think that's worth exploring, but I don't know if we've had that full conversation yet.
Susan Hill Smith, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Likewise.